Hello everyone and welcome back. In our first video, we talked about why leadership matters in criminal justice. Next, we're going to go one step further by exploring what leadership actually is and why it is so important to every criminal justice organization. Whether you aspire to become a police officer, correctional supervisor, investigator, attorney, probation officer, or administrator, leadership will influence every aspect of your career. Even if you never supervise another employee, you will still have opportunities to lead through your actions, your professionalism, and your integrity. Throughout my own career, I've learned that leadership isn't something reserved for chiefs, sheriffs, or directors. I've practiced leadership as a legal professional, as a college professor, as a program director here at Fremont, and even as an elected school board trustee. Each role required different skills, but they all had one thing in common. Leadership was about influencing people toward a common goal. Today, in this video, we'll examine that idea together. So these are the learning outcomes. By the end of today's lesson, you should be able to explain the nature of leadership, distinguish leadership from management, and understand why effective leadership is essential in criminal justice organizations. This lesson also directly supports two of our course learning outcomes. First, you'll begin evaluating how leadership styles promote ethical policing and community trust. Second, you'll begin building the foundation you'll need later in this course when we develop strategic leadership plans designed to improve morale, operational efficiency, and public accountability. Everything we discussed today becomes the framework for the rest of the term. So we're going to start with a simple question. What is leadership? Most people immediately think about a rank. They picture the chief of police, the sheriff, the district attorney, or a correctional captain. But leadership is much bigger than a title. Leadership is the process of influencing people to accomplish shared goals. Notice that the definition does not mean authority. That's because authority can require compliance. Leadership earns commitment. One of the lessons I've learned while serving as a trustee at the school board is that very few decisions are made by one person alone. Every trustee has one vote. If I want to move an idea forward, I can't simply tell people what to do. I have to persuade. I have to listen, collaborate, and build consensus. That's leadership through influence rather than through authority. The same principle applies in a criminal justice organization. The best supervisors don't simply rely on their rank. They earn credibility by demonstrating competence, fairness, and integrity. So one of the biggest misconceptions is that leadership and management are the same thing. They are related, that's true, but they're also different. So managers and management focuses on systems, whereas leadership focuses on people. Management organizes schedules, they budgets, staffing, they develop policies, and use resources. Leaders inspire employees. They establish vision and create organizational culture. In an organization, you need both. As I serve as your program director here at Fremont, there are days that required management of employees. There's days where I review the curriculum that you guys are learning. I scheduled faculty. I monitored our accreditation requirements and kept everything moving along for this program. But leadership is different. Leadership involves mentoring your new faculty, helping you as students overcome any obstacles that you may face, navigating difficult conversations, and creating a positive culture where everyone felt supported. The same distinction exists in a criminal justice organization. A police sergeant may spend the morning approving reports and assigning shifts. That's management. Later that afternoon, the same sergeant may coach a struggling officer after a difficult call, rebuild trust within the squad, or help resolve conflict between employees. That's leadership. The strongest organizations develop professionals who can do both. So why does leadership matter? Leadership matters because every decision a leader makes affects other people. In criminal justice, those decisions can affect constitutional rights, officer safety, community trust, and even life or death situations. Think about the environments where criminal justice professionals work. They engage in traffic stops. They respond to domestic violence calls. They work in your jails and courtrooms. They're the first on scene at emergencies. They respond to natural disasters, any critical incidents that happen in your community. Every one of these environments demand leadership. I'm often told my students that people rarely remember every policy you've written or every report that you've completed. In your career, you're going to write hundreds of reports. But they remember how you treated them. They remember whether you listened. They remember whether you were fair. Leadership is ultimately about people. John Maxwell said, famously, leadership is influence. While there are many definitions of leadership, I think this one captures an important truth. Influence isn't something granted by a badge or a title. It is something earned. People choose to trust leaders who are competent, ethical, and consistent. As an educator, I see this every semester. Students don't simply learn because I'm standing at the front of your classroom. They learn when they believe I care about their success, when expectations are clear, and when I model the professionalism that I expect from them. The same principle applies in criminal justice agencies. Employees are far more likely to follow leaders who earn respect than those who simply demand obedience. One of my favorite ideas about leadership is that everyone can lead. You don't have to wait until you're promoted. A rookie officer can demonstrate leadership by mentoring a new academy graduate. A dispatcher can lead during a chaotic emergency by remaining calm and organized. A correctional officer can de-escalate conflict simply through professionalism and communication. Leadership opportunities happen every day. Some of the best leaders I've worked with never held the highest title in the organization. People followed them because they consistently demonstrated integrity and competence. This shows leadership is a behavior, and it is not merely a position. When we look at leadership in the criminal justice system, we're operating in a really consequential industry. We make decisions involving life and death on a daily basis. Every choice we make as a criminal justice professional carries ethical, legal, and human weight. We deal with things such as constitutional rights. As a leader in a law enforcement agency, leaders must ensure every action taken respects the rights guaranteed to all people under the Constitution. They also have to balance that with public safety and protecting communities and requiring clear priorities, coordinated responses, and use sound operational judgment. They also have an importance of taking care of their people through officer wellness. If we want a sustainable organization, we have to invest in both the psychological and physical health of every member of the team. That's especially in a law enforcement organization. We also have to have a high level of ethics and accountability. We see police accountability issues every day on the news. We don't want to be the next news story. So characteristics of effective leaders. What makes someone, effective? Leadership is a learned skill. It's not a born skill. An individual, you want to follow someone who has integrity. They do the right thing even when nobody is watching. They own their successes through accountability. They don't deflect the blame. They have communication. They convey clear direction. They actively listen, and they build understanding at every level. They use emotional intelligence. They recognize and manage emotions, yours and others, to lead with empathy and composure. They act with courage. They make hard decisions. They address misconduct, and they advocate for what is right under pressure. Service orientation. They lead with humility. They prioritize the mission and the team above personal recognition. So organizational culture is something very important. Sometimes you'll just hear, culture is simply the way we do things around here. But, one leader can actually make a difference and transform an organization's culture. Now, trust me, it takes time. But leaders can influence culture through what they reward, what behaviors they tolerate, and what they ignore. If leaders recognize professionalism, employees value professionalism. If leaders overlook misconduct, employees begin believing misconduct is acceptable. I've seen this in education as well. If students pay much closer attention to what instructors consistently model than to what they merely say. The same is true for criminal justice professionals. Your actions establish the culture for your organization. So how do we engage in ethical leadership? Ethics are inseparable from leadership. People often ask whether ethical leadership is difficult, and the answer is yes. Sometimes the ethical decision is also the unpopular decision. As a school board trustee, there have been occasions when I know that regardless of the decision, someone in the community would disagree. Leadership sometimes requires making decisions that are lawful, ethical, and in the long-term best interest of the organization, even when they are unpopular. The same challenge happens for law enforcement and law enforcement supervisors. Holding an officer accountable is not always comfortable. Supporting an employee who made the right decision under difficult circumstances is equally important. Ethical leadership requires consistency. People notice whether leaders apply standards fairly. Leadership also requires community trust, and this is earned over time. It isn't created by one speech or one press conference. It grows through thousands of interactions. One thing I've learned from public service is that trust begins with listening. Even when people disagree with your decision, they are more likely to respect the process if they believe they were heard and treated fairly. That's an important lesson for every criminal justice professional. Procedural justice isn't simply a theory, it's a leadership strategy. When leaders communicate openly, they explain decisions, and treat people with dignity, they strengthen public confidence. So now we have a leadership scenario. So imagine you are now a patrol sergeant. Congratulations. But officer morale is low. Community complaints are increasing. Your officers believe administration doesn't understand what happens on the street. I want you to think. What would you do first? Would you immediately issue new policies? Probably not. I'd start by listening. Meet individually with your officers. Meet with community stakeholders. Gather information before proposing solutions. One lesson I've learned throughout my career is that good leaders rarely assume they already know the answer. They ask the questions first. Okay, so I also want you to engage in a leadership reflection. I want you to think about this as, maybe put it in the comments below. Think about a leader who made a meaningful difference in your life. This could be a law enforcement leader, a school, family, or community. What made them effective? Use that example to shape your own leadership identity. Did they communicate well? Did they build trust? Did they lead ethically? And did they develop others? Leadership begins with self-awareness. So how can you model that behavior in your own role today? So let's look at our key takeaways for this video. Today we've learned that leadership is fundamentally about influence. It is different from management, although successful leaders must understand both. Leadership exists at every level of an organization. Leadership shapes organizational culture, and leadership requires ethics. And leadership builds community trust. As we continue through this course, we'll move beyond distinguishing leadership and begin examining the qualities that distinguish exceptional leaders from average ones. So thank you for joining me today. As you complete this week's reading, I encourage you to think about the leaders who've influenced you in your own life. Ask yourself this question: what did they do that made people want to follow them? We'll begin answering that question in our next lecture as we explore the traits, motives, and characteristics of effective leaders. I'll see you in the next video.